Welcome, friends, to Everyday Insights, where I catch up with valued colleagues and share their life learnings so we can all learn to live a little happier. This is the third podcast in my series on personal success, where I'll uncover how different people define success and how we can ever hope to attain it. Today's guest is my friend, Dinesh Matthew. We met at Intel about 12 years ago when we were both starting our positions in their market research department. Dinesh has an interesting career path, starting as a chemical engineer at P&G, moving to New York City and working on marketing research for MTV, then moving to Portland, Oregon to grow his family, and more recently, switching careers into operations at Intel. Besides his career, I look up to Dinesh as a quintessential family man, a loving father to his 3 kids, and a great husband. We talked about how he manages to keep his busy career moving forward while supporting the growth of his kids and his wife's successful startup. And if you want to jump ahead to the end of this episode, we also talked about how he sees the crazy boom in AI tools impacting his work, and whether our boy Tom Brady is really a failure. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me know that someone out there cares I'm doing this. And with that, let's dive right in. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming, Dinesh. It's great to see you.
Great to be here.
Why don't we start off with just a little bit, tell me about yourself in a quick fashion. Give me your elevator pitch or something, or your what's some key things to know about Dinesh. Yeah, you've been working on your interviewing stuff.
Yeah, so that'll be my first question is it the work elevator pitch or the personal elevator pitch or all of it? What would you like?
Whatever you like. What's your story, I guess? What do you think people want to know about you? I've heard that's a very American thing, the idea of asking someone their story. In other cultures, supposedly this was a research thing I learned once, but some other cultures, maybe it was China, that's like a
faux pas?
Yes, exactly. But hopefully I didn't offend you.
You didn't. No. My story, I totally know what you mean. So I'm just going to give you the work elevator pitch. Throwing a little bit of personal on the side too. Well, I'm from the East Coast. So I've lived in a variety of places on the East Coast, Midwest. I've kind of been in a few different industries, some big companies, and then ended up on the West Coast, really because of family. Everything up until the last 12 years has been more like my choice in terms of the career has really taken me where I've lived.
And then once you had kids, it was for the family. You stayed here.
Once we had our first, it suddenly shifted away from, the job being the reason I'm living somewhere to more family.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. And you have 3 kids, like 13 or so to 8.
Yeah, 13, 11, and 7. Mm-hmm. They're all summer birthdays, so they're all go a year up between June and August. Coming out here was really a family transition, and that was probably a big deal for me, just 40 years old. Yeah. I guess I'd grown up by that point, you know, and it was family that was drawing me to places and not necessarily my own career.
Is your family here or your wife's family?
My wife's family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, when we left New York City is where we were before moving out here, and we met there. My wife and I got married when we were there and had our first child there. But my family's down in Florida. So when we realized that we wanted to move closer to family and not be out on our own, we looked at Florida, looked out here to Portland, and Portland was the easier transition, or really Intel was the transition that brought us out here.
Yeah, that you searched for jobs, found that one, and we're like, yep, I guess it's Portland.
Yeah, and haven't looked back. And it's really been the family thing. I think that's really gotten the essence of what I've been over the past decade plus here.
Yeah. I was looking at some of your background stuff earlier, and I saw that your undergrad was chemical engineering.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny, of like chemical engineering, and then you're in the music business, and then eventually end up just general research and tech.
It's been some shifts, definitely, in what I've been doing.
Yeah, it's a very common story. I think that people have that undergrad that's maybe entirely different from what they actually do. But how do you find it? What did you learn from that time that you think actually matters nowadays?
To your point, I was a chemical engineer, and in college, it was a challenge, to be a chemical engineer, and just academically and just intellectually, it was a challenge. And so I enjoyed that. And I graduated and did well, interned in places, and started right out of school. Actually, my last 2 internships were Procter & Gamble, and that's where I started.
Doing chemical engineering stuff then?
I was in manufacturing when I first started, and just like manufacturing process engineer, like hardcore engineering in the plants 24/7.
Wow.
Production lines, installing equipment, starting equipment up. So did that for a couple of years, and I think I just realized that wasn't, I'll give you another elevator pitch. What I realized over those first 3 years was it was all about equipment and processes. And I just realized that instead of studying equipment, I was more interested in studying people. And so that's when I made that transition from like hardcore engineering into market research. And that was probably about 3 years into my P&G career. And then my last about 2.5 years was in market research. And that's where I stayed till coming to Intel. So,
how did you make that transition? How did you convince someone that you could do it?
Well, it was my last internship actually at P&G. I kind of got lucky.
So you were on like one of those rotational programs for that 3 years?
Yeah. Two internships. So my second internship was a combination of like a classic engineering product development, but as part of a product development kind of internship, I also had some market research part to it. So I built this product from beginning to end. And the beginning part was doing your standard like market research kinds of things, interviews and, things that we're both familiar with, so learning, that's what I started doing and learned initially through the internship. So I had done market research. That was the first time I'd done it. And the internship went well. So I had some contacts at P&G because of that internship. So when I realized, it was one of those big soul searching moments, like 3 years in, I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of soul searching after those first 3 years. And I remember, sitting on a couch, I was in Georgia at a manufacturing plant. I was contemplating what my next move was going to be, because in the career path I was on, I knew what my next role was going to be. And I was like, I'm not into that. Like, I'm just like not into doing that. It was pretty heavy time for me, just by myself, really, kind of maybe an initial midlife crisis, call it, but it was not midlife. It was
early life.
Early life, 25, whatever. I guess it hits people at different times, right? For me, it hit at 25. And I started thinking through, well, what was it? And I had some good management and people and supporting at P&G, and they just really helped me kind of think through it. And then I thought back to that internship actually, which had been 3 years before at that time, and realized that I want to try that. And it wasn't that I necessarily thought, market research was going to be my thing. It was just more, that was interesting. I enjoyed it. Let me try that. And so I knew people from that time when I was an intern that were still at P&G. It was still 3 years. It wasn't that long. And so I had a couple of people that really helped make that transition. I had people in engineering who were just like, you're making the biggest mistake in your life. Like, you should not do this. And then I had people on the other side who were like, yeah, we know you can do it. And so it was a bit of tug of war. But
why did they think it would be a big mistake? What did they see in their future, or where did they see you going that they thought was great?
Yeah, just because I'd had some good experiences on the engineering side and manufacturing. There was a group of us, a big team, when we started up a huge, like, $1 billion set of equipment, and it went really well. And so, the big question was, well, why are you going to move to a totally different career path when you've got something good here? Like, the path was chosen for me at that point. It was like, okay, you do that really well. Okay, then this is the next thing. And then you kind of march on down, right? So the questions were more of, well, you've got this path in front of you because this assignment went really well, and that was a really seminal assignment. So why are you going to throw it away and go do something that's really very different?
Very interesting. Yeah, that leads great into this kind of questions about success and about what do you think of as the big accomplishments from all that time, from then to now. You could think career or personal.
This is part of where, going back to what I was saying early on, it probably would have been more career things. I mean, that one startup was a huge thing. Like I said, it was like the defining moment of, okay, I have a very easy path on the one side, and I chose to go the other way. So that'd be one. But just looking back, and I think this is part of my growth, I think of it more from the personal side versus the vocational side. I mean, I've got plenty of examples of things that I could bring up from work. But if I think about the things that really matter to me, to where I am today and where I want to be down the road, post-retirement, the whatnot, it's really the family stuff, the personal stuff. That's the stuff that, like, I think of as the big accomplishments and the things that I'm growing from and the things I want to continue to grow on.
What are a couple of good examples from that of personal,
I think,
personal accomplishments or goals you've achieved?
Finding my wife, in a sense. I'm going to be, probably very candid, very cheesy, but it's the reality for me. So if I think about the things that are the biggest impacts for me where I am today, it's finding that person to spend the rest of my life with. Yeah. So that was one. That decision and getting married, that was a huge accomplishment. As you well know, and probably anyone that's got a very significant partner or spouse, it's those kinds of relationships, and deciding is one thing and then making it work. So I'd say probably one specific moment was getting married. That was a huge accomplishment. And then if I was to think just holistically, it's just the life we built together, the two of us, and then my kids. Yeah. I mean, each one of them. It's like just the miracle of life. And when I talk about these accomplishments, it's also the ups and downs of it. It's not all rosy by any means. I mean, it's like we can go down that path too. We've talked about kids, right? It's like, I mean, any given day, any given part of the day, there's, something you're struggling with or something you're wondering if you did right or some issue you're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the kids and just how they're growing and just how they're being people and becoming people. And we think, hopefully, we're trying to make them as good a part of society as possible in their own different ways. Yeah. So those will be my big accomplishments: marriage and then the kids.
What would high school or college Dinesh think of that, of where you are now? And did he have the same kind of goals?
No, I mean, definitely not high school. College, I think I knew that I would want to get married and have kids. But high school, college, I was big time into having a successful career. That's the barometer. Yeah. A certain life that I was going to have, and I thought the kids and
And what did that mean to you at the time versus where you've made it to at this moment in your career and in life?
I never had specific goals. I had never had I'm going to have a certain amount of money by the time I'm 30, or I'm going to have a certain position by the time I'm 40. I never had those goals. So for me, it was more of just financially being successful enough. I think from early on, I've always been maybe more balanced in kind of how, and that's just how I'm wired. I've never thought that happiness was one thing. It's been a balance, even in college. So let's go back to college. So academics is one thing. Social was another thing. Family, so I just naturally kind of gravitated to trying to be successful at a number of things, not just in one thing. I wanted to have a lot of fun. I wanted to do well in school. I wanted to build some really positive relationships. So to me, those were the kinds of goals I guess I had, is I wanted to feel good about how I achieved personally and socially and then vocationally. Yeah. Those were my goals. But family wasn't, I always thought, well, family would be part of that social side. And it's kind of turned out that way.
Yeah. Are there things from back then you can think of that you haven't achieved, or that, what have you missed out on or still to the future?
So I'm going to go back to another kind of time I had at P&G. So there was a time where I was thinking, especially staying there, a lot of the upper level management, you kind of had to go through marketing. That was the line. There was a time where I was looking into that and even got into the application process and then didn't make it to the end.
And maybe part of why you started the insights and marketing track a little bit, or got into engineering?
Yeah, it was actually, it's interesting. That was a while ago. I'm trying to remember exactly how it all sequenced out. It was around the time where I was thinking about what I wanted to do separately. You're right. So marketing track was one, the market research track was another, and then staying in engineering. So I didn't make it into the marketing fast track. And I remember being bummed about that. But then thinking, okay, second, it's market research. And then I looked back on that a few years later, and I was like, you know what, that was actually, things turned out fine. That was actually good that I didn't do that, because 3 years later I left P&G and ended up in New York City. And I tell you what, if I'd been in that marketing track, it would have been really hard to leave. That would have been, I would have basically been P&G for the rest of my life. And that there's a lot of people that are that way, and I have a lot of friends that are still at P&G. So that would have been probably a fine life, but I wouldn't have gotten to where I got to now. Yeah. Flash forward to now, I just realized that it's just hard for me to tell what myself 3 years or 5 years from now is going to want and be. So I just learned at that time, you got to take it a couple years at a time and just kind of go from there.
Let's fast forward to now then. How do you plan differently now than you planned back then?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like I'm on the last third of my career. I got about 15 more years left. So I think my goals now is to really get to that retirement and to just financially get enough money, in a sense, and maybe just get myself ready even physically and mentally for that. And that's my goal, is to be able to retire within the next 15 years. Yeah. I'm hopefully not waiting until 15 years, but within the next 15 years.
Yeah. So we both have been going through this, trying to figure out what our next step is going to be. And when you mentioned that idea of retirement and kind of, you've probably been doing some planning for the future or something, like, what does that look like? What would a retirement be? What is this goal you're trying to get to?
Yeah, I can give you some general ideas on goals. I don't know if I have it. It's not close enough yet to where I've got some specific things. I think retirement for me means I've got a couple kids that are off on their own, doing their own things. Maybe not all three, but at least two of the three. So that's one goal. My wife and I will have gotten enough things done financially that we can take a step back from having to work 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, hours a week. So yeah, it kind of hinges first on having the things in place so that my wife and I can really kind of enjoy retirement together and be able to support our kids the way we need to, but that they're off on their own.
I'll have to talk with some of our colleagues that have retired and discuss these same kind of questions. Like, what is success? Is it that point I get to in the future?
Yeah.
This thing I'm saving up for, and then I take a trip and take an RV and drive around for a while and then live back home? Or is it something you have constantly? Is it something you have earlier on? Is it something that's, piecing out through your life? How do you find success through all those time points in life?
I think when I get closer, I'll know. I just naturally fell into this, oh, wow, it's just too hard to think 5, 10, 15 years ahead. Like, I'm going to think 2 years ahead. And I think I just fell into that because of some of those experiences that I mentioned early on in my career.
Yeah.
Just realizing this thing that I was disappointed about, like, it actually turned out pretty good. It's not like there's just one path, but it's almost like when you look back, hindsight is, 2020, right? Like, the things that I did then or the things that happened to me, they actually ended up being pretty good in the end. And so I'm a glass half full person in general.
Yeah. You don't worry about it all ending for you soon, and this is all you've accomplished.
Those concerns are always there, right? If you think about them, heck, everything could end right now. It's like, well, there's only so much I can do, about what's going to happen tomorrow or even 2 hours from now. So I'm just going to try to do the best I can right now and, go from there.
Maybe tell me about some of those transition periods. Like, one of your big accomplishments you mentioned was getting married. And was that a big goal setting thing, or was it something you worked on in the background? Like, how do you choose to find that success?
It took work. It wasn't a goal like I have to get married by a certain age or anything like that. But I remember even when I was in college, like, I wasn't really that focused on relationships in terms of romantic relationships. I just wanted to have fun and meet people and hang out and whatever. But, and I, even until I was probably in my mid-20s, I was kind of that way, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm not ready to settle down, whatever that word means to anyone. I was dating somebody when I was 24 or 25, and I was like, you know what? I think at that time I was like, all right, now I'm ready to like think seriously about like a family. And so it became a goal actually at that time, but it was a goal for the next couple of years. It wasn't like I was like, oh, it's going to be 10 years out. No, I was like, you know what? And I had a lot of pressure from my parents at the time. So it wasn't, wasn't just me, kind of your typical like India and East, it's like, yeah, you're supposed to get married young, it's not, you don't wait this late. Right. So I was getting that pressure too. So maybe it wasn't all just internal, it was external as well.
Yeah.
But I think at that time I was like, all right, now I am ready. And then I put, it's like, so then it became a mindset. I hadn't really thought about it from a success standpoint, but it was more of a mindset of, okay, now I want to be serious about meeting someone. And that's a different shift. Like, I have to shift the way I think about and the way I spend my time, right? It's like, then it is about dating people and being there for someone. And whereas before that time, I wasn't really there for people. I was there for my friends, but I wasn't there for anyone of more than that.
How did that change how you treated the partners you'd find or something? What was different when you found your wife? What was one thing you did that you wouldn't have done maybe in a prior mindset?
It was empathy. If I was to just blanket statement a word, I didn't really have empathy before then. That desire to really kind of look at things through someone else's eyes and not just through my eyes. And what does that look like to build something together? I think those were the big shifts that I had. And so from that point forward, I started dating people seriously, and it wasn't, I was in New York City at the time. So, well, no, I wasn't in New York City. I was in the Midwest. I was in Cincinnati at the time.
Okay.
So, but still a big enough place, I guess, to where it wasn't hard to find people to date. So then it just became about, all right, this relationship's going to be an important part of my time. And I think to me at the end of the day, it's allotting time. I think for all of us, the one thing we have that we can spend is time. Money can go away, physical health can go away, anything else can go away, but our time, our attention, right?
Time's always going away.
That's the one thing we have, right? Or call it attention. Right? What am I going to be attentive to? So I just realized that, all right, I'm going to be attentive to another person from a romantic standpoint and from a building a life together standpoint.
That reminds me of one of the tips you told me in the past that I thought was really good, or something was about you trying to be more mindful of how you and your wife spend time together, and in choosing that, or like having defined times per month or per week, or you have different ways you've done it, I think, over time. But yeah, I think that's an interesting concept of making sure you provide the attention to your partner.
Yeah.
How have you seen that play out through your relationship?
At that time, really was about time, right? So instead of hanging out with people, maybe seeing somebody once a week or even then, or moving on to the next person right away, it was like, all right, I'm going to commit to 2 or 3 days or nights during the week. And I think it kind of grew from that when I ended up meeting my wife, and we spent at some point every day together, right? So it's like, okay, being open to that. Part of it, for me at least, was just giving up my own time to spend time with someone else. And that's really where it started. And so at the beginning, it was like, okay, I'm going to give up my own time a couple of nights out of the week. All right. And then when I found her, all right. And then she'd be the first one to tell you, she was like, no, this isn't going to be just 2 or 3 nights. It's going to be more than that, right? If this is going to work. And so because I'd kind of committed myself to that kind of being open to that, I was like, okay. Whereas 10 years or call it 8 years before that, I'm like, no, I'm not ready for that. But I was, and I committed the time, and so flash forward to now, as we've got 3 kids, and our time together is not as available as it was before, but we make that time. So, it's a couple times a week that, actually every night we try to spend time together.
That's great.
But it's because we kind of started from that standpoint. So,
yeah, it's interesting to see those skills that got you into the relationship are still important now, or still a critical part of keeping the relationship healthy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I find difficult, and I've asked you about too in the past, is balancing that with the time with the kids too, of how to prioritize a relationship versus the relationship with the kids, or raising I right now, at least through the pandemic, have often defaulted to just spending all my time with the family. Like, it's tough to find time for yourself, for the relationship, and the family together. Never mind work and external life as well.
Yeah.
You got any good tips on that? How do you choose? You have an extra hour or something in the day, and you're like, should I go play with my kids? Should I go do something on my own, or go spend it with my wife?
I am a big believer in that analogy with the oxygen masks that come down airplane. You got to stick that mask on yourself first. And so I think that's something I learned early on. And as my wife and I built a life together, I think we together are also connected in that way, in terms of, hey, we got to make sure the two of us are good first before the kids. Because if we're not good, then it's going to impact the kids. If we are good, then we can be there for our kids. And so I think I've taken the same thing on, even in terms of like myself versus my wife. It's like, hey, I got to make sure I'm good. Otherwise, I can't be there for her, and then we can't be there for our kids. So it kind of starts with me. And so it may sound a little selfish, but I feel like it's the oxygen mask. I got to make sure that I'm able to breathe myself before I can help, whoever's next to me.
Yeah.
Right.
I like it.
So I tend to think when I have those extra hours, it's like, okay, what am I going to do to kind of build myself up? Or if I feel good, okay, then what can I do to help build my wife up? Okay, if we're good, okay, then, so I do, and it's not like I'm sitting there thinking this, it's pretty instantaneous, but I just always think, okay, am I good? Are we good? Okay, kid's good. But I mean, honestly, if I'm working, then it's like, it's not about the kids or my wife. It's like, am I good? Okay, then is this thing that I'm doing good?
Yeah.
Or, so it kind of, to me, it always starts with me.
That's a kind of a classic thing from relationships too, is you can't start a new relationship unless you know yourself, unless you're good with yourself and you're comfortable with who you are. You're not going to be a good partner, whether that's early in the relationship or, as you're saying, how you choose your spend your time now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
And I honestly think that that kind of thing doesn't end, right?
Yeah.
Because as we've been talking, I mean, life now versus life 10 years ago versus life for me 20 years ago. Like you were asking before, like if would I have thought about 20 years ago when I was in college, like this is where I would have thought I would be. I would have thought, okay, yeah, that could be a goal, but I would have no concept of what it really meant to be here. So to me, it also, you have to realize, what I need for myself is very different now than what I needed for myself 2 weeks ago or a month ago. So it's a constant thing. I'm always checking in with myself, just even subconsciously. And I think my wife and I are always checking with each other, but that tends to be a little more on purpose. And then, then it's the kids from there.
Good stuff. I think we should try a new topic of some kind. Let's see. One was I remember years ago, I guess 7 years ago or so now, you had a surprise kid happen, right? That you guys weren't planning. And I thought that was an interesting point in your life that you seemed kind of frazzled about it or worried.
Yeah.
A big change from the plans you'd set forward.
Sure.
How do you think of that now, many years on? Just like that, you look at the age gap in your kids, it's not that big anymore, it feels like to me, but how does it feel to you?
Yeah, it's not that big. I mean, because actually our youngest is 4 years younger than our middle one.
Yeah.
So it's not that big a difference. I was one of three. And so the age difference between me and the youngest is similar to the age difference of my oldest and youngest. So yeah, the three of us, my siblings, we made it work, and I see it working. My older two hang out with each other more and just have more common, just mentally,
And they're both boys. Maybe that does some of it too.
Yeah. Well, our middle one is actually non-binary.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Actually we didn't talk. Yeah. So, I guess got a boy, a they, and a she.
Oh, cool.
But I think it's more just, I don't know, just mentally they kind of connect more because they're 2 years apart.
Yeah.
I think that'll go away. And I've already seen it going away as they're getting older. Like they like to hang out with her more now than they did a year ago and 2 years ago. So I feel that
just the ability to have skills or to actually play the same game is far apart.
So the stress for us, it wasn't necessarily because we were worried about the kids hanging out together or how they were going to be together. It was more just, how do we handle 3 kids as opposed to 2? Because I think this is the conversation you have had. I mean, my experience is every additional child is like exponential growth in terms of how much time you're spending. It's not like 2 to 3 times. It goes up faster than that. And maybe it's just when they're younger, we'll see as they get older. Like I said, I mean, obviously there's financial aspects of that, but I think it was more just the energy and the time.
If you could send a message back in time, what would you tell Dinesh 8 years ago?
I think it's very similar to what I was describing when I was talking about the earlier experience. It was disappointing when I didn't get that one, the fast track, if you will, but it ended up working out well. Like for her, same kind of thing. I mean, it works out. We've got got a daughter. We didn't have a daughter before. She has her own energy. And it's just fun to see her growing up and fun to see my older two kind of growing up with her and being responsible for her as well. They're older siblings, so there's that side of it too. Especially my middle one wouldn't have been an older sibling if there wasn't a third one, right? It ended up being okay. And there were some decisions that happened out of that really worked out well. So one of the things I think we've talked about, we have an au pair. We wouldn't have gotten an au pair if it was just 2. For us, at least, we wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I know other people do, but when we were outnumbered, we're like, okay, we need another adult in the house.
Hire some support.
We need some full-time support
in the backup
in the house, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's been a really good thing for us. And we've had an au pair for a few years now, different au pairs, not the same one. But so there's that dynamic of the family that we never would have had if it wasn't for a surprise third kid.
Yeah.
I'm a glass half full, but also at the same time, it's tough. It's been really tough and it continues to be tough. But I think I look back on it, things actually turn out different and actually in a good way than you think. That's what I would have told myself 7 years ago.
Do you wish we had 4 kids? Or...
No.
And why not?
We are able to just handle what we have. And I don't know what else we would have, how we have another au pair. It's just mind-boggling again. But what I just said to you, it's like, okay, we'd figure it'd take its own journey through.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's kind of my point. Is like, how do you even pick? Or
Right.
like,
Exactly.
There's timing and there's luck and there's
Exactly.
biology, lots of reasons why. But
Well, the one thing we did is we
do you know?
biologically made it so that we shouldn't be able to have another one,
Right,
which we
yeah.
didn't do after the second one, right? So biologically, we shouldn't have to have that situation.
Even more
happening,
sure now.
happening.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I should always knock on wood with that because there are stories and it has happened where even when you biologically do that,
Yeah.
things unravel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's more so like just this. It's another one of these existential kind of questions. What, how many kids should one person have? What is enough? What's the right amount? What's too few? What's too many?
yeah, and I mean, we've got plenty of friends who have lots of kids. When we're four, I think four is the most we have. We know, but other people, more than that. So yeah, I think it really is kind of your family situation, which you've got, and part of it too, I think, is what you're used to. Both my wife and I, we've had 3 kids in our families. Well, she's actually got kind of an extended family, and she's got more siblings. But at any one time in a house, the maximum was 3 for her. Well, I take that back. There was probably 4 for her. So, I mean, but for me,
But similar size, I guess.
yeah, for me it was 3. So I was like, okay,
Felt like a good
we could
goal
probably
for you.
handle that.
Yeah.
Because I know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to be more than that. So, but I'm sure we could probably figure it out if we had to.
So what about the au pair? What has that brought into the family dynamic, or what have the kids learned from having an au pair, you think?
I think they get more of an adult than they would have had if it was just my wife and I, because we're both working. She's got her own business. I think we would have had less time for them. They would have probably been some after school programs or doing some different things. But now they have somebody else who's an extended family member, who's another family member who's there. I mean, so I think the au pair gives them another close family member, immediate family member to hang out with and get to know and take care of them. And I think also it's somebody from another culture that they wouldn't have had experience with. So far, all of our au pairs have been from South Africa. So now we've just gotten that the South African culture maybe is what they're learning. But I mean, they've all been from different parts. But still, yeah, somebody from outside the U.S., that side of life too, that different culture, they're getting that experience now. They wouldn't have gotten that before.
Has that been a factor in your relationship too, that you have an Indian background and your wife doesn't? Or like, how have you guys mixed cultures that way?
I'll give this credit to her, to my wife. She is big into other cultures. And in fact, like the language that's spoken in the part of India where I'm from, I never spoke it. She is actually taking it upon herself to kind of start learning it.
To talk with your family back there, or what?
I think it's, a little bit of that, but then I think more so just
to understand.
like she's just like linguistically into like different languages and things like that. So, so just a small example of she's really into like other cultures. And we got married in India, actually. I was telling you about some of the receptions we had in New York, but we actually got married in India. And that was her push, not really my push. I would have been good getting married here, but she wanted to get married there. And she's been even when we lived in New York, I mean, we didn't have an immediate family right in New York City, but we had some extended family that lived in Long Island. So she's always been very kind of connected to that. To my family. I don't know if it's necessarily because it's a different culture, but it just happens to be a different culture. So that's been pretty seamless just because, and I'll give that really kudos to her. A lot of, her side of things and what she wanted. Yeah. I think it could have been very different if that wasn't her. But she really wanted that. And I think, that family connection, and it just happened to be India, was really important. And so we've been back a few times with the kids since getting married. So, she's continued to build that kind of connection and really enjoy those times. And even here, family here, or through social media, maintain that connection. I guess you don't need to be there anymore these days, right? You can interact through social media all the time. So she does that. So yeah,
it's worth something at least.
Yeah. And I think, and she's been really good about it. And I've been definitely supportive as well. Like our kids are very much attuned to both cultures. I mean, they think of themselves as bicultural. It's not like, just I live in the US, or obviously not just Indian. So they look at life as kind of, I'm not just one culture, primary culture here, of course.
Yeah.
But so this worked out well. And I think, like I said, I give her really a lot of the credit there.
That's interesting. Yeah, very cool. I feel like that's all of the silly, deep type questions. I think we can get into some more fun things maybe.
Sounds good.
One thing I've been asking people about that is topical is just about AI in general. I think the most interesting thing to hear is from different people in their different careers, how they think it's going to impact them in the future and their particular type of job.
I've gone into operations, so
Right.
I'm not in a classic market research role anymore.
Exactly. You talked a lot about the choice you made to switch one time in your career, and then you did it again another like 7 years ago or so.
Yep.
Now it's been
About 5 years.
5 years.
Yep.
It's been a bit of time that you said, I'm going to move out of market research. I'm going to go into operations, and I'm going to focus my career all around that. It's a difficult change. So anyway, in the operations space, what do you see as some of these new large language models or any of the AI tooling, or what's the way that kind of career could be impacted?
I would have some very easy answers if it was still market research, because I think we know what that space is like. And actually, you could make an argument that AI is, maybe rendering a lot of classic market research jobs or positions. Are those needed anymore, right? But moving,
What kind?
moving
What do
market
you
research,
mean?
maybe some of the analytical sides of things. Analyzing the data. I think AI is able to analyze data in a quicker way, maybe. So maybe those standard analytical skills, in a sense.
Do you think of that more for qualitative type stuff, like reading through a transcript and kind of summarizing what the person says?
I think
or are
so.
You thinking more...
Even I think even numbers wise, all of it. I think AI can look for trends. Whether it's qualitative or quantitative, I think AI can look for trends in a much more holistic way. Be able to, like some of the classic stuff we were doing, connecting the dots, right, to primary research and secondary research. Like AI can do that so much quicker, right, and just tap so much more secondary out there. Like I think the limits are for a person to do that versus AI, much different scope.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of the impact in our job. We were asked to read or be aware of or disseminate among people a lot of this kind of secondary research stuff that services were posting, different research companies were creating, and Intel subscribes to, and then you can get value out of. People can read it when they have some kind of topic that comes up that's relevant to it, and that's great. But if that's all just going into ChatGPT or one of these kind of large language models, a search engine, it just knows it, and you're just asking the questions, and it's just spitting back the fresh, right data from those things. My mailbox was constantly full of spam, basically, that Intel was paying a lot of money for. To get all this research all the time. It's just like, there's no way I could read it all or care about it all or even find it useful. Like there's a lot of stuff in there that's just not useful to me most of the time. Occasionally maybe, the AI could do a better job of reading all that stuff and keeping up.
Totally. And I think from that standpoint too, I think it can render a lot of primary research needs, basically they're not needed anymore.
How so?
I think a lot of times when we're doing primary research is to answer questions that we don't know the data for, right? Or that data is not available. But I think the data is out there. I just don't think, as people, it's just hard, we have probably our scope is a bit limited in terms of finding the data. I think if it was up to AI would find the data. And I think there's a lot of questions that we do research for that we might not need to do research for anymore because AI will find it. So classically, the research side, very much, it's interesting. On the operations side, business operations tends to be very specific to the team, the organization, the strategies that are happening. It's hard for me to see an immediate application for AI. I think AI can be tapped for some, for operations, there's always this kind of general part to operate. There's a generalist side to operations where you're just, okay, we have a legal question. What's the answer in this? We have a specific legal issue. What's the policy? Or, we have a budget. We got to manage our budgets. All right, how do we close this? We have a gap here. I think AI could be there for that and answer those kinds of generalist questions. But when it comes to designing a new policy or a new process, which is just a classic part of business operations, it's very specific to that time or that question, that area. I think AI can help kind of start the process, maybe to borrow back from the classic market research. It's like, okay, like what's out there to get me started, but then to take it to like a final level I think there's just an ingenuity part that maybe I'm just not aware that AI can do that I think operations is still going to do. It's almost like asking the question, like, can AI create a strategy? Like, can AI create a strategy for something? I don't know.
Disturbingly well, yes.
Or is it the right strategy, right? So anyway.
Yeah, that's the question.
Because
What
I
is
think
the right thing?
Right, because I think part of operations and strategy work too is, it's not like there's one answer, right? So part of it's selling the strategy through. Can AI sell the strategy
and
through
executing
to other
it, like we talked about last time? A lot of it's just the execution,
right?
that you have to choose something and go do it,
Right.
And so you can get ChatGPT or some other language model to spit out whatever you want. You tell it to pretend to be a great strategist, and then ask it the question, and it'll write something pretty solid for you.
Right.
And then internalizing that, making it your own, and going off and doing it is a whole different question.
And
you
a
can
lot
write
of it,
documents all day.
Oh, totally. And a lot of it is getting other people aligned to it and doing it, right? Because a lot of your work is not independent. It's all about getting other people to follow along.
Yeah.
To do what you build or to the policies or that kind of thing. There's a certain amount of collaboration and communication and selling, if you will, quote unquote selling, that AI, I don't think can do that yet.
The classic kind of question is if it can write your paper for you in school, right? The professor can ask you a question, you send it on to the AI, it writes a great paper for you. Obviously, you didn't learn anything through doing that. So same thing in business. If you get the AI to write the strategy for you, now what? Like, you didn't really get bought into the strategy. You don't really know how it works or why you're doing different parts of it necessarily, or really remember it all because you didn't spend the mental effort to come up with the whole flow of what's going on.
Exactly.
And I don't know what that's going to do to us as a people and how we.
But I also don't see how that could be delivered. How you could execute, because executing a policy, a process, a strategy requires you to be able to adapt too. And if you're going to adapt something, you have to know it. And in your example right there, a person doesn't know it. They're being told it. And so there's a certain level of experience that you have to drive something forward. We're talking about things that get driven forward over weeks and months and maybe even sometimes years. Mm-hmm. This isn't something that happens just in a day. And so in order to do that, you have to know it. You have to live it. And if you just get a chatbot to spit out an answer for you, I don't think you know it enough to drive it forward.
Yeah. I think the flip side I could remember from my work experience too is how many times people focus in on like one slide, or one data point, one chart, one which could have a great insight on it, a great look at the sales on this certain thing, and wow, that really makes me think we need to build more of that thing. But a lot of strategy stuff in our big strategy decks would get boiled down to the 10 slides, the 5 slides, and really in there's one or two key slides, one or two key ideas that everybody hinges on and all the decisions are made based on. So couldn't it come up with those, it's like, are the people really that good? I guess that's the real question. If they're really focusing on this one, if they're making all the decisions based on this limited piece of information or some perception.
Yeah, the thing though that you don't get from AI is people are going to poke holes in it, right? So even though it's like 3 or 4 points that you're driving forward at the end of the day, you have to survive people poking holes in it. And again, to me, in the corporate world, it's not just one person driving something forward. It's like you have to have a lot of people on board and a lot of people to drive it forward. Yeah. How do you answer all those questions if you don't know? Coming back to the experience side, you have to know what you're delivering, and AI is not going to deliver that knowledge to you.
Yeah.
They'll deliver the answer to you. So then if somebody asks this question about it, like, how do you answer that question? You go back to you go back to the AI and say, hey, this question, you keep asking it questions and it keeps answering.
That's the trick, is going to be meshing the two together, I think, is learning how to work with it.
Right.
And because the tool is super useful, it gives you some great information and great answer really quickly.
Right.
But when you need to go answer the follow-up question, how do you do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to have to figure that out.
Yeah. I think what I've learned in the operations space, this is, again, a cliche, right? But there's an art side and a science side. So I think the science side, AI can do. the art side, the kind of the intuitive side, that side I don't think AI can do. So I think there's a marriage that needs to happen to drive that forward. And I think that's where you still need the people, is the art of operations, the art of strategy.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we're going to have a lot of learning to do over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about success and figuring out what is enough success for our life. You and I are both Patriots fans or Tom Brady fans in the end. Do you think he made the right decision? Should he have stayed on this year? Was it better to go out on top, or is the fact that he retired now the best move?
I think it was the wrong decision. It's hard for me to separate my own like heart and passion. It's like I would have wanted Tom Brady to leave a Patriot, right, versus going to Tampa Bay. But he did. I think that was the right decision for him. Turned out well for him. He won a Super Bowl
to go to Tampa Bay.
To go to Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
I think he should have left right after that. When he retired the first time, as I've gotten older, I've realized it's more about your family unit and kind of your personal side, and not so much about what you do, specific work accomplishments. And so I look at what Tom gave up personally. I don't know what his relationship with his kids.
Yeah.
But it seems like his family life took a backward step.
Yeah, I was really sad to see that happen. It would have been much nicer if we could have had a positive story from the world. It seems like every celebrity, every couple we have to look up to ends up not working. It's very, I don't know. Maybe there's some good examples of ones that.
Yeah, I think
what couples can we think of that are doing great?
Yeah, I think. You're right. I think what we hear about in the media is all the ones that don't work, right?
Ryan Reynolds, maybe, is that our?
Yeah. Gosh, isn't it cool? Was it Goldie Hawn? Who's she married to? Kurt Russell? Aren't they still? They've been 40, 50 years, right? I don't know. I think there's a lot of, you just don't hear about them, right? Because it's like,
less news.
Yeah, less news, right? But I think Tom could have had it all if he left a year ago.
Maybe the relationship was still on the rocks, and who knows? I have no idea.
It's possible, but let's just say
it seemed like it at the time.
What we read,
seemed like they were doing great.
The nail in the coffin was him going back, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like that was the final straw, and then he didn't have a good season, and he doesn't have a marriage anymore.
Yeah.
So
maybe he can get it back together.
I hope so. I hope so. Right? I hope so, and that definitely has happened.
Or whatever makes him happy,
right,
of course.
Right.
Another news piece that I was thinking about the other day. There's always constantly news about people dying, people getting sick. Jimmy Carter right now is in hospice, or there was some actor from something. He's 26 and he passed away. I don't know. I struggle with how to think of that stuff. And then looking back a little further, Norm Macdonald last year passed away. I found that very sad, and I'm a big fan of his and a lot of his work. And I, spent months just watching lots of clips of all stuff he'd done. But I don't know. I was at a restaurant the other day, and I overheard this man getting really upset about Jimmy Carter, and like he had just found out the news, and he was like getting all worried about it, and he couldn't talk to the people at his table anymore. He said, "No, I'm just worried about this." And I was like, "Why? Or what's the He's not a young man. He's lived a great life, accomplished a lot, super successful guy by pretty much any metric you could come up with. Why is that such a big piece of news, and how are we supposed to feel about it? What do you think?"
Well, to me, the reason that it's a big piece of news. So I'll start with the first part, and then how do we react to it? I'll of course give you my thoughts on that. So I think on the news front, I unfortunately think it's news a lot of times in the media when things go bad.
Just if it bleeds, it leads idea?
Sometimes you hear about the good stuff, but I think it's the bad stuff, right? It's like the chicken and the egg. So we've become tuned to paying attention when something is going bad for someone else. Now, is that because we feel better about ourselves that way, and that's why we tune into it? Or is that because the media has tuned us that way? But I think for whatever it is, it's news because something isn't. Tom Brady, same thing, right? It's like, oh, look at Tom, I'm better off than him, right? In this one specific space. Jimmy, you just talked about Jimmy Carter, accomplished all these things. If I compared myself to his accomplishments, I'm feeling very inferior. But if I'm comparing myself to being healthy and he's not, then I think there's that sense of comparison that happens in you. It makes you feel better. Is that right? I don't think so, but I don't know. That's just, to me, one of the realities of our current society.
Yeah.
So that to me is why it's news.
It's also the idea of sadness there too, that like this man in the restaurant was very sad that he's sick, which I felt as well when I first learned about it, but also not, I guess I wasn't alive. I don't think he was ever my president in that way, but it's not a sadness that I can't get over pretty much instantly. Like,
yeah. So then the second part is the reaction to it, right?
Yeah.
I was really young when he was president. I remember some things about him, but not that much. I think when those things happen, it also signals to us our own mortality. So I think we get, I don't know about this guy.
That could be it. It could be a big
But
part
for
of it.
me, when I hear about somebody in hospice, it's like, wow, I go back to my own, like I've had, my mother passed away 15 years ago, more longer than that. So I remember her being in hospice and I remember that sadness, right? So I wonder if sometimes, so for me, that's when I hear their hospice now, like I think back to that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's what makes me sad. It's not necessarily that Jimmy Carter's in hospice or, I think it's like, wow, what would, we just talked about things could be very different tomorrow or a week from now or 2 months or 3 months from now. Like, I think you also start thinking, well, what would happen if I was in hospice, right? Or my wife was in hospice,
Yeah.
So I think you connect, at least me personally, I connect that way. It's more about like the what ifs and the remembering back to people that are close to me that were in that situation. That's what makes me feel sad or concerned.
Yeah.
And to your point, I tend to get through that pretty quickly because I quickly also realize it's not me and it's not my family, it's someone else. And I'm like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
But I think it just reminds you of the fragility of life. To me, that's the way I feel. And I even go back to the Tom Brady thing, right? I mean, marriage is a tough thing. It's if you don't put the work in, it's not always gonna be. So to me, when I hear about even celebrities breaking up, it's like I have this immediate like pang of, oh, gosh, what would happen? What would I think of if it was me? Not about Tom Brady and Giselle. It's like me.
Yeah.
I personalize it. I'm like, oh, but we're good. We're okay. I get through
I
it.
like that.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think that's pretty much all the questions I got for you. Any other thoughts or any other topics you want to cover or questions for me or anything?
Oh my gosh. No, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for joining me, Dinesh, and look forward to talking again soon.
Sounds good.
All right. That's it for today. Thanks a ton for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you again next time, friends.